people improperly held, quit the torture, etc. And the illegal settlements is for us to get serious about withholding a portion of our aid, where I don't believe that's going to happen. Certainly it's not going to happen in this U.S. Congress. And the Israeli government has made it hugely plain that they're not going to end settlements, they're not going to take proper action to defend Palestinian human rights short of that. And so I think the tail sort of wags the dog in terms of U.S. policy towards Israel, and I'm not hugely hopeful, though it certainly is a reason to hope when you see the peace talks going forward. I would like to think that protection of human rights should not have to wait for a negotiated peace settlement. These are laws. Israel has obligations. The Palestinians have obligations, by the way, and the PLO has something to answer for in terms of ordering killings of perceived collaborators, etc. I don't mean to equate in numbers the two, but there are violations that are forbidden on both sides. I would like to think that it shouldn't have to wait till the year 3000 when there's a peace settlement to see an end to torture, etc., and that the Israelis should stop that nonsense right this minute. Is there any other question? Jen?
Could you give some reaction to the MIA POW situation? Or do you have any comments to make about the soldiers that were maybe left behind in the Vietnam War and the controversy that they're having out of local hearings on this issue? It seems to me that if some of our soldiers have been kept there, that we are culpable in some way because we have not done something about getting them out before now.
Well, I'm not an expert on this, Jenna, so I'm going to speak just personally rather than in my capacity at Human Rights Watch. In fact, there's been a lot of controversy about live sightings, etc. My friends in Congress who've seen the CIA stuff on this say that that is unfortunately bogus, and that there really aren't live missing in Vietnam anymore. And the Vietnamese have, interestingly, and I'm not defending their human rights record either, but they have come up with, considering that the country was pulverized back into the Stone Age, they managed to produce the remains of an extraordinary number of dead, considering the level that the country was left at. I'm not saying they don't have an obligation to produce absolutely every bit of information, but to be honest with you, the Vietnamese have a lot riding on this. They know they're not going to have normalization of relations with the U.S. until they do. They know they're not going to get the humanitarian assistance that they desperately need. And in fact, I think the goods are out there. And I think that if the United States, now this is speaking personally because my organization does not take a position on this, but in my personal view, if the United States would simply get with reality and have normal diplomatic relations with Vietnam, like we do hundreds of other countries, many of whom have despicable human rights records, we would be in a lot better position to be negotiating with the Vietnamese and to be searching for the remains and to have our own teams in there and to have I think we could really get to the bottom of the story a lot easier if we didn't keep Vietnam in this special category. No relations, that kind of thing.
Well, I think the thing that yesterday I believe I heard that they think maybe there are 10 that they know maybe in Laos, and so it's the Laos that the families of those people feel that they have not really investigated like they should have to get to the root of this problem.
Well, I certainly don't mean to diminish their pain and suffering in the slightest, but there is also sort of a limit about what the United States can do in another sovereign country. And what do we want to do? Send in the 82nd Airborne? I mean, unfortunately, some of what happens in war is that people get lost. There's many, many more missing from World War II. It's just that the Vietnam War is fresh in our minds, and Korea, certainly. Other thoughts, criticisms, questions? Please.
Can you shed any light on the airstrikes that Turkey has been conducting against the Kurds in both eastern Turkey and northern Iran after the war?
If we needed any more evidence that the Kurds are the despised of the world, we're seeing it now. It makes me very unhappy at my own government in this regard. We could not do much to protect the Kurds from Saddam Hussein, but we could do a lot to protect the Kurds from the Turks, who are our big allies in the region. And, Iraq, of course, has no objections to Turkey bombing its territory, the government of Iraq, because they don't like the Kurds. And I think it is an absolute disgrace that our ally, using our weaponry and using our military assistance, is going after the Kurds. And I wish people were screaming about it from the hilltops, but I don't see that happening.
I have another question, but it's not related. It's about the Panama invasion.
Yeah.
Do you have any further evidence on number of civilians that were killed in the invasion?
Interestingly, the Panama invasion, in terms of U.S. Accounting for the dead, was kind of like a dress rehearsal for the Gulf War, a little dress rehearsal, because the same kinds of failure to account properly for civilian dead and for military dead that was hugely seen in the case of Iraq was in miniature in Panama. America's Watch has done a good deal of investigation of this, and there's been, and we're very critical of the administration for the needless civilian deaths and for the failure to account. To the best of our ability to tell, the civilian dead number, I hope I get this right, about 300. And there have been huge numbers thrown about. Ramsey Clark has a 10,000 figure, and I've heard others that go higher. But America's Watch, with the best of intentions, went all over that country and met with citizens groups and human rights groups and priests and church people. And if that number of people had died, there would be mass graves somewhere, and there are not. So we are critical of the Defense Department for failing to account. They put people into unmarked graves. But as near as we can tell, the numbers of civilian dead are about in that range.
I think there was one mass grave found with over 200, and then there were reports of people being burned alive by flamethrowers on the night of the invasion, and also bodies being thrown into the ocean.
Those reports I've not heard, which does not mean they're not true. There is a mass grave, but that 200, we account for that in our. Yeah, are we running out of time? Maybe one or two more questions? Sure, Jeff.
I just, when I see Oliver North running around the country making a lot of money speaking, I think to myself, here's a man who admitted he committed a felony and lied to Congress. He was banned from Costa Rica for running drugs. He was involved in drug trafficking, at least perhaps he was involved in drug trafficking. And I wonder, the United States has the power to, at least the power to check human rights abuses in other countries, etc., if they want to. But is the United States a lawless society? And who has the power to check the United States?
The United States is not a lawless society at all, and you don't need my patriotic speech, but it's the very fact that we have laws, that the violation of those laws make us so sick. I think that the people who have the power to check lawlessness, of course, is us. You know, that's what a democracy is all about. It is very, I must say, going back to the theme of objectivity, it is a very, very disturbing time when you see the new director of the CIA who lied loudly, regularly, blatantly throughout his confirmation process. When you see our newest Supreme Court justice who was clearly lying, never mind Anita Hill, was clearly lying throughout his confirmation process about his own jurisprudential views, about his opinions on such things. That's the way the Bush administration got through a controversial nominee. His handle simply said lie, stonewall him, and he did. And we should be disappointed and outraged, not just at the president who gave you that nominee and that, Gates is the head of the CIA. You should all be furious at the U.S. Senate for allowing those things to happen. Furious. I mean, people ought to turn those guys out of office. It was a scandal. And the fact that lying in high office is allowed to go by. I mean, I learned, a couple of months ago that one of my best friends up in Congress had been bugged by the CIA. When Casey was the head of the CIA, they placed a bug on Vic Johnson's telephone. Vic Johnson was the staff director of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, and that ought to be a front page scandal. The CIA is bugging the U.S. Congress. It's really... But the only way around it is for people to be informed of their rights and demand them.
What about the press? Does the press make that a front page issue, maybe?
Well, I don't customarily beat up on the press. I feel pretty lucky, with a pretty free press. I think there's lots that could be done better. The Gulf War, the press's participation under those ground rules in the Gulf War was terrible, and I don't know how they're going to gain back any access. The administration, of course, justifies its limits on the press by virtue of the fact that, according to public opinion polls, people hate the press. But there's more to U.S. policy than public opinion polls, and the press plays an extraordinarily important role. One more.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, information actually, if information
Well, it's a good question. We are not a citizens group. We don't have a grassroots base. We're a research organization largely. And the two ways that we have of disseminating human rights information, one through the press, and we do get pretty good coverage, I think. I don't know about the smaller papers, but the large papers that cover international news with regularity do cover our material quite a lot. We publish a lot of opinion pieces, etc. The other way, of course, is what I do for a living, which is to get the information into the laps of the U.S. Congress, which is, and we make our demands on the Congress through my work and try to educate them, and etc. In terms of getting it into the hands of the American people, we don't have another way. We do send our material to, the press, the magazines, etc., who report on what you might say alternative press, and I think they use it sometimes. But it's we're not AT&T. We're not. Speaking of AT&T, it seems to me that the whole information revolution and the use of computers and communication through computers is going to change the way we think about information, and potentially is an enormously empowering notion. A lot of people say that the reason the Cold War is over is because of computers and fax machines. And knowing Eastern European dissidents who got busted and thrown into jail because of being found with a mimeograph machine, a lot of people say that Eastern European economies simply had to have high technology information exchange. They had to have computers. They had to have telephone systems that worked. They had to have that is an essential to participating in the modern economy. But those things in the hands of ordinary men and women are empowerment. And I heard a very interesting lecture once from a computer guru from Eastern Europe who said, we're not going to, these regimes are not going to survive the information revolution. And he was right, they didn't. Maybe we need one of those in our country as well. I think with that I'll stop. Thank you very much.